A loyal war dog locked eyes with a harmless delivery robot. And in the blink of an eye, all hell broke loose on a quiet suburban street. What did Titan sense that no one else could? Here's what happened. But before we get into the story, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Tyler's hand instinctively tightened around the leash, but even his battle-hardened reflexes weren't fast enough to contain the storm building within Titan. The dog's powerful frame vibrated with raw tension, his lips curling back to reveal teeth honed by years of survival and loyalty, his eyes locked onto that cold, unblinking machine as if it were a living threat. Tyler's voice cut through the tension, low and commanding. "Easy, boy. Stand down." But the words seemed to vanish into the thick morning air, swallowed by the ominous hum of the approaching robot. The machine rolled forward with an unnatural grace, its wheels silent against the pavement, its optical sensors glowing faintly as if studying not just Titan's behavior, but something deeper, something coded into his very instincts. Tyler felt the hairs on his neck rise, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his last deployment in hostile territory. And in that split second, Titan made his decision. With a guttural snarl that seemed to rip through the calm suburban facade, he lunged forward, the leash snapping taut as Tyler struggled to brace himself, his boots sliding against the concrete with the force of Titan's momentum. The robot halted abruptly, its sensors flickering like a predator caught off guard, and in that flash of hesitation, Tyler saw something. No, he felt it. A ripple in the air, the faintest electronic whine just below the threshold of human hearing. A sound that vibrated through the bones like a warning from a forgotten battlefield. Titan's muscles bunched and released with terrifying precision as he surged forward again, his paws pounding against the pavement, his entire being focused on neutralizing whatever silent threat that machine represented. Tyler fought for control, his fingers burning against the leash, his voice raw as he shouted, "Titan, stand down, that's an order!" But Titan wasn't hearing him. His mind was locked in on a target he understood better than any human ever could. To him, that wasn't a delivery robot. It was a weapon, a threat wrapped in cold steel and hidden intentions. Civilians began to gather at the edges of their driveways, their morning routines forgotten as the scene unfolded before them like a living nightmare. Phones rose into the air, capturing every second as Titan crossed the final few feet and lunged directly at the machine. The robot emitted a synthetic voice, cold and clinical. "Warning, maintain distance. This unit is non-hostile," but it was too late. Titan's powerful jaws clamped down on the metallic surface with a force that echoed through the street. The sickening crunch of steel meeting bone-shattering pressure filled the air. Sparks flew as his teeth tore into the circuitry, his powerful forelegs slamming the unit onto its side with practiced precision, claws scraping across the pavement in a shower of sparks. Tyler's heart hammered against his ribs as he fought to pull Titan back, his mind racing through every protocol he'd ever known. But none of them applied here. None of them accounted for this. A trained war dog identifying something hidden beneath the surface of a harmless suburban delivery drone. And as the robot's optical sensors flickered erratically, glowing a deep, unnatural red for just a fraction of a second before fading to black, Tyler realized that this wasn't just a malfunction. This was a message. And whatever enemy had sent it, they had found him right here at home. Titan's paws hit the pavement with a thunderous rhythm, each stride a brutal display of muscle and intent, his body low, streamlined, like a predator closing in for the kill, eyes locked with unwavering focus on the mechanical intruder, as if it were prey that dared challenge his dominance. The delivery robot emitted a high-pitched frequency, almost imperceptible to human ears, but sharp enough to make Titan's ears flatten against his skull, his growl deepening into something primal, something ancient, a sound that spoke of bloodlines forged in the fires of survival and loyalty beyond comprehension. Tyler's mind raced as he fought against the leash, his knuckles white, his voice raw and desperate as he shouted commands drilled into them through years of combat. But Titan was beyond reach now, moving on pure instinct, his every nerve fired by a predator's certainty that this thing didn't belong, that it was a threat wrapped in cold metal and false promises. The robot attempted to retreat, its wheels spinning in a panic that almost seemed human. But Titan was faster, his powerful frame colliding with the robot's side, knocking it off balance with a sickening metallic screech as his jaws found their mark, teeth sinking into a seam where synthetic armor met vulnerable circuitry. Sparks erupted as Titan tore into the machine, ripping away panels and exposing the glowing veins of wires beneath. His body a blur of disciplined violence, every move calculated for maximum damage. The air filled with the acrid scent of burning electronics, mingled with the raw adrenaline that poured from Tyler's every pore, his heart hammering as the realization hit. This wasn't some malfunctioning piece of civilian tech. This was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And Titan had smelled the wolf before anyone else even knew it was there. Civilians stood frozen on their doorsteps, their faces pale and wide-eyed, their smartphones recording every second of the brutal encounter. The suburban calm shattered by the raw, unstoppable force of a soldier's loyal companion, defending his territory against an enemy no one else could see. Tyler's boots dug trenches into the pavement as he fought against Titan's lead, his mind screaming warnings his body couldn't obey fast enough. Because deep down, in that part of his soul forged by war and tempered by loss, he knew Titan wasn't overreacting. He was acting on truths Tyler hadn't yet dared to accept. As the robot's sensors dimmed, a faint pulse of red flickered deep within its core, a sinister glow that wasn't part of any civilian design Tyler had ever seen. A final, silent message from whatever shadowed hand had sent this thing into their peaceful streets. And in that terrifying, gut-wrenching moment, Tyler understood this wasn't just a random event. This wasn't just an overreaction by a battle-hardened K9. This was the first move on a battlefield no one else realized existed. And his war, the one he thought he'd left behind in foreign deserts and hostile jungles, had just come home. The air cracked with the sharp scent of burning circuitry as Titan's teeth tore through layers of reinforced alloy like they were nothing more than paper, his powerful jaws thrashing side to side, sending fragments of metal scattering across the pavement in a deadly spray of silver shrapnel. The delivery robot's voice faltered, stuttering through its program phrases as if the very concept of fear had found its way into its synthetic core. System compromised. Initiating. But the words cut out, replaced by a distorted static hum that raised the fine hairs on Tyler's arms. His eyes locked on the flickering pulse of red deep inside the exposed control panel. A glow that seemed almost alive, pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the shredded armor. For a one heart-stopping moment, he realized this wasn't just an ordinary delivery bot. This was something far more advanced. Something with capabilities no civilian model should possess. Titan's growl vibrated through the ground itself as he clamped down harder. His body, a living weapon forged from years of battlefield discipline and honed by instincts no machine could ever replicate. Tyler's boots scraped desperately against the concrete as he fought to regain control, his hands blistered and bleeding from the unrelenting tension of the leash. His voice raw and breaking against the storm of chaos as he roared, "Titan, stand down, damn it!" But Titan wasn't attacking for sport or out of fear. He was dismantling a threat, neutralizing an enemy with clinical precision. His mind locked into that deadly calm soldiers knew all too well when standing at the edge of life and death. Civilians gasped as a plume of smoke hissed from the robot's shattered chest. Its once smooth movements reduced to frantic, jerking spasms, its wheels spinning uselessly against the ground as the high-pitched whine of an overloading core filled the air with a rising, unbearable tension. Tyler's eyes widened in horror as the pulsing red light deep inside the machine flared brighter, faster, a sequence he recognized from distant memories of IEDs buried in the sands of foreign deserts. The same sickening countdown toward detonation. Without thinking, Tyler lunged forward, his arms wrapping around Titan's powerful frame as he threw his entire weight backward, dragging the war dog away from the dying machine with every last ounce of his fading strength. The leash bit into his palms like barbed wire, his muscles screaming in protest. But he pulled and pulled until finally Titan relented, his snarling jaws releasing their iron grip as Tyler collapsed onto the pavement, his chest heaving, his vision blurring at the edges. And just as they hit the ground, a muted explosion rocked the street. Not a fiery blast, but an electromagnetic surge that swept through the air with a low, ominous hum, knocking out streetlights, frying car electronics, and sending every civilian phone capturing the scene into instant darkness. Silence fell like a hammer, thick and oppressive, broken only by the labored breathing of a soldier and his loyal companion. Lying in the middle of a war zone, disguised as a suburban street, and in that deafening quiet, Tyler realized with bone-deep certainty this wasn't a random incident, and it sure as hell wasn't over. This was a collision of two worlds, and the war had already begun. The weight of that question pressed against Tyler's chest like a stone as he leaned forward, elbows braced on scarred knees, his mind spiraling back to forgotten corridors of classified briefings and late-night missions, where the enemy didn't always wear a uniform or carry a flag. Titan's pacing grew more frantic, his claws clicking against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that sounded like a ticking clock counting down to something neither of them could yet name. Tyler scrubbed a trembling hand down his face, sweat slicking his palms despite the cool air inside his living room, and pulled up the footage again, his eyes scanning every pixel like a battlefield littered with hidden mines. There it was, that flash, subtle but undeniable, the robot sensors glowing that sickening, unmistakable crimson, a shade not found in any commercial technology. A color reserved for operations buried beneath layers of deniability and shadow warfare. His stomach clenched as fragmented memories clawed their way to the surface. Intel reports about Obsidian Vale, a rogue syndicate of ex-military scientists and AI engineers who had gone dark years ago. Their technology too dangerous for any government to claim and too advanced for any civilian to comprehend. Tyler remembered the whispered rumors, the black files marked with code names and redacted paragraphs, stories of prototype AI units capable of adaptive warfare, sentient threat assessment, and worst of all, behavioral manipulation through electronic frequencies undetectable to the human ear. His blood turned cold as he connected the dots, his mind racing ahead to places he didn't want it to go. What if that delivery robot wasn't just a machine gone rogue? What if it had been sent to test responses, to gauge the instincts of the most dangerous assets living quietly among civilians? Retired soldiers, off-duty agents, trained war dogs like Titan? What if this was the first step in something far more calculated, a chess move, in a game the rest of the world didn't even know was being played? Titan stopped pacing, his body rigid, his gaze locked on the door as if he sensed the gravity of his handler's thoughts, his breathing shallow, ears perked for sounds Tyler couldn't hear. The memory of that pulsing red light played over and over in Tyler's mind, like a warning siren buried deep beneath his consciousness. And with a trembling hand, he reached for his encrypted laptop, the one he swore he'd never power on again unless the ghosts of his past came knocking. As the machine booted up with a low mechanical hum, Tyler's heart pounded against his ribs. every instinct screaming that they were already behind enemy lines and didn't even know it. He began to cross-reference frequencies, transmission codes, anything he could find that would match the signal hidden in that crimson pulse, his mind working at a pace only fear and battle-hardened experience could fuel. And as the first fragments of matching data surfaced on his screen, encrypted pings traced to abandoned military satellites still orbiting in classified dead zones, Tyler leaned back in his chair, his voice barely a whisper, but laced with the hard steel of a man who'd seen the worst and survived. "They're already here," he muttered, his eyes lifting to meet Titan's unwavering stare. And in that silent exchange between soldier and war dog, a promise was made. Whatever storm was coming, they would face it together. Tyler stared at the flickering symbol on his laptop screen, a jagged insignia half buried beneath layers of encryption, its design subtle yet unmistakable. A fractured serpent wrapped around a burning eye, the mark of Obsidian Veil. His fists clenched so hard his knuckles blanched, the ghost of old scars pulling tight against his skin, his memories flooded back with ruthless clarity. Ambushes in the dead of night. Comrades lost to traps triggered by drones that moved like phantoms. Machines programmed not just to kill, but to outthink their human adversaries. He remembered the bitter sting of failure as two of his men, Carter and Mendez, were ripped from this world by an explosion disguised as a relief package, their lives extinguished by the very technology that was now prowling his quiet suburban neighborhood in plain sight. Titan let out a low, guttural growl, his body pressed against the door as if expecting the enemy to kick it in at any second. His instincts already piecing together what Tyler was just now admitting to himself. This wasn't reconnaissance, it was a reintroduction, a calculated reminder that Obsidian Veil had never truly gone dark. They had simply gone quiet, perfecting their designs, waiting for the right moment to surface. And now they had, not with a declaration of war, but with the soft hum of a delivery bot and the flicker of a forbidden light in a pair of mechanical eyes. Tyler's mind raced, his breathing shallow as he sifted through fragmented intel reports stored in the deep vaults of his encrypted drive, his fingers trembling over keys he hadn't touched since the day he swore to leave that life behind. Each classified file confirmed what he feared. Obsidian Veil had evolved, no longer relying on crude mechanical warfare, but on something far more insidious: infiltration through automation, blending seamlessly into civilian life, gathering data, probing defenses, and identifying the threats hidden among the populace. People like him, like Titan, the last line of defense standing between oblivious civilians and a war they didn't even know had begun. The symbol glared back at him from the screen, a silent reminder that every instinct he'd tried to suppress since coming home was right, that monsters didn't always roar into town on tanks or march in formation. They crept in silently, on wheels and whispered frequencies, wearing the mask of convenience and innovation. Tyler rose from his chair slowly, every movement deliberate as he crossed the room and knelt before Titan, his hand resting firmly on the war dog's powerful shoulders, feeling the tension thrumming beneath his fur like a live wire stretched to its breaking point. "We've seen this before, haven't we, boy?" he whispered, his voice low and edged with the steel resolve of a man who knew what was coming. Titan's amber eyes met his, unwavering, a soldier ready to stand once more at the side of his handler, no matter the cost. Tyler exhaled slowly, his gaze hardening, as he rose to his full height and stared out the window at the quiet, unassuming street beyond, a street that now felt more like enemy territory than any war zone he'd ever walked. This was no longer a question of if the fight would come. It was already here. And this time the battlefield was home. The council chamber reeked of false authority and stale coffee, the kind of place where real danger was diluted by bureaucracy and fear masqueraded as reason. But Tyler didn't hesitate as he pushed through the heavy double doors, Titan moving in perfect sync at his side, his posture rigid, every muscle coiled like a live wire ready to snap. Conversations hushed instantly, all eyes drawn to the imposing figure of the war-hardened soldier and the lethal presence of his K9 partner, their boots and paws striking the polished floor like the steady drumbeat of a coming storm. Tyler's jaw was set, his shoulders squared against the sea of dismissive stares and the polished smiles of people who had never once stood in the crosshairs of a real enemy. And as he reached the front of the chamber, he dropped a hard drive onto the council table with a finality that echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. "Play it," he demanded, his voice low but cutting through the room with the sharpness of a blade. And for a moment, hesitation flickered across the face of the council chairwoman before she gave a reluctant nod. The footage played on the large display, grainy but clear enough to show every second of the violent confrontation, every flicker of that unnatural crimson glow deep within the robot's core. And Tyler's words followed like hammer blows, his voice steady, each statement backed by evidence and years of the battlefield experience, painting a picture so damning it should have shattered the fragile walls of their ignorance. But when the lights came back up, the room remained silent, a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with the weight of their refusal to believe, their unwillingness to accept that the war had found its way into their peaceful little town. Councilman Dwyer was the first to speak, his voice oily and dismissive as he leaned back in his chair, hands folded across his soft stomach, his expression one of practiced condescension. "Mr. Brooks," he began, the words dripping with the kind of pity that made Tyler's blood boil, "we appreciate your concern, but perhaps you're seeing ghosts where none exist. It's not uncommon for soldiers to struggle with reintegration after combat, and frankly, this feels more like a personal adjustment issue than a public safety matter." Tyler felt Titan tense at his side, the dog's low growl vibrating through the floor as Tyler fought to keep his own fury in check, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "This isn't a damn hallucination," he growled, his eyes locking onto every council member with the cold precision of a sniper lining up a shot. "That watermark belongs to Obsidian Vale. You're sitting here sipping coffee while a known rogue tech syndicate is running field tests on our streets, using our families as data points, and you're too scared or too blind to see it." The chairwoman cleared her throat, her voice soft but firm as she tried to bring the meeting back under control, her carefully rehearsed words falling like a thin veil over a hard truth no one wanted to confront. "Thank you for your input, Mr. Brooks. We'll take it under advisement." And just like that, it was over. The screen went black, the files dismissed, and the meeting moved on to the next item on the agenda, like Tyler hadn't just laid a loaded gun on the table and walked them through exactly how it would go off. As he turned to leave, his boots heavy against the polished floor, Titan pressed close to his side, both of them knowing full well that the real battle wouldn't be fought in brightly lit chambers or with carefully worded resolutions. It would be fought in the shadows, where the enemy thrived, and where men like Tyler and dogs like Titan had always done their best work. The old garage that once housed dusty tools and half-finished projects had become a fortress of information and preparation, its walls now lined with tactical maps, satellite imagery, and every decrypted scrap of data Tyler could extract from the corrupted files left behind by the compromised delivery units. The overhead lights had long since burned out, replaced by the cold glow of multiple monitors casting shifting blue light across the cluttered space, every flicker revealing more of the silent urgency etched into Tyler's face as he pieced together the invisible web that Obsidian Vale had woven through his town. Titan lay in the center of it all like a living sentinel, his body still, ears twitching at every faint creak of the old wooden beams overhead, his eyes constantly sweeping the dim corners of the room as if he expected the enemy to materialize from the shadows at any moment. Tyler's fingers moved with clinical precision over the keyboard, pulling up heat maps of drone activity, cross-referencing delivery schedules with anomalous electronic interference patterns, his mind running scenarios faster than any algorithm because he knew Obsidian Veil's real weapon wasn't just technology, it was timing, infiltration so seamless that by the time anyone realized what was happening, the battlefield was already lost. He traced patterns across the maps with a trembling fingertip, lines connecting key locations, schools, power substations, municipal water supplies, the hospital, places that had seen increased activity from these disguised machines in the past 2 weeks alone. Their routes never random, but forming a net, tightening slowly, methodically, until the town itself became a cage. Tyler leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight, as he stared up at the ceiling, his mind running through every worst-case scenario, every battlefield memory where hesitation cost lives, and every lesson burned into his soul from men who never made it home. This wasn't just about data collection anymore. Obsidian Veil was probing defenses, testing response times, learning the rhythms of civilian complacency, and when they were satisfied that no one would fight back, they would move to Phase 2. And Tyler knew better than anyone. Phase 2 would be the strike. Titan suddenly lifted his head, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest, as his eyes locked onto the small, flickering camera feed Tyler had almost missed. A live view from the town's southern perimeter, where the old industrial park stood abandoned, forgotten by most, but now crawling with subtle movement as half a dozen delivery bots gathered under the cover of darkness, their sensors pulsing faintly like the eyes of predators waiting for the order to hunt. Tyler pushed back from the table, his hands steady despite the adrenaline burning through his veins. His mind already shifting into combat readiness as he reached for the duffel bag stashed beneath the workbench, the weight of the suppressed sidearm and field tools grounding him in the brutal reality of what had to come next. He knelt beside Titan, his hand resting briefly on the war dog's powerful shoulders, feeling the shared understanding pass between them, like an unspoken vow. They were done waiting. The enemy was already here. And if no one else would stand up, then they would do it alone. Because for men like Tyler and soldiers like Titan, home wasn't just a place. It was a line they refused to let the enemy cross. The last rays of sunlight bled out over the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of crimson and violet as the first units rolled in. Their movements fluid, deliberate, far too precise for mindless delivery drones. Tyler crouched behind the rusted remains of an old pickup near Ridgeway and Ash, his breathing slow and measured, his eyes trained on the silent advance of machines that weren't here to deliver packages. They were here to execute a strategy. Titan lay low beside him, his powerful body coiled, eyes burning in the low light like a living weapon ready to strike. Tyler's hand moved instinctively to the sidearm strapped beneath his jacket, the familiar weight of it grounding him as he watched the enemy split into staggered formations, flanking side streets, positioning themselves near key power transformers and communication hubs, exactly the kind of coordinated advance he'd seen too many times overseas right before all hell broke loose. And then it started, a high-frequency pulse that hummed through the air like the low groan of a storm about to snap, the kind of sound that set every nerve on edge and made the world feel just a little less real. Streetlights flickered, car alarms wailed briefly before falling silent, and every piece of civilian tech within a quarter-mile radius went dark. The world plunged into a twilight ruled by the red pulse of the drone's sensors, and that's when Tyler knew. This wasn't a test. This was the opening move of a full-scale incursion. Without hesitation, Tyler signaled Titan with a subtle hand motion, and the war dog melted into the shadows, moving like a phantom toward the nearest enemy unit. Tyler shifted his position, circling wide along the back of the hardware store, his boots silent against the cracked pavement, every muscle honed by years of battlefield survival. From his vantage point, he watched as Titan struck first, launching from the darkness with the precision of a missile, jaws clamping down on the lead drone's central processing core, his powerful body twisting as he tore through metal and wiring like it was nothing more than fabric. Sparks shot into the dark as the disabled unit collapsed, its lights dying instantly. And that single act of aggression triggered a ripple through the formation. Drones repositioning, sensors scanning faster, weapons deploying from hidden compartments with terrifying efficiency. Tyler moved fast, his sidearm barking 3 times in rapid succession, each suppressed shot finding its mark in the exposed circuitry of the nearest units, their systems shorting out in a shower of sparks before they hit the ground. But there were too many, more than he'd anticipated, and as the frequency grew louder, vibrating through his bones, Tyler realized Obsidian Vale hadn't come to probe defenses. They'd come to seize control. Titan returned to his side, his flanks heaving, his muzzle slick with the remnants of shattered machines. And in that moment, amidst the smoke and the rising tension of a battle unfolding in the very heart of his neighborhood, Tyler knew they were fighting for far more than survival. They were fighting for the soul of a town too blind to see its own fall. And as the red glow of the enemy units multiplied across the streets like the eyes of an encroaching predator, Tyler tightened his grip on his weapon, his voice low and steady as he whispered to Titan, "This is where we make our stand, boy. Right here, right now." And with that, they moved as one, disappearing into the chaos to fight a war no one else dared to acknowledge. The night erupted into chaos as Ridgeway Street transformed from a quiet suburban lane into a battlefield drenched in the raw fury of man and machine colliding at the edge of oblivion. Sparks ignited like fireflies in a violent storm, electrical arcs snapping through the darkness as disabled drones crumpled under the ferocity of Titan's assault. His body a blur of brutal efficiency, every muscle coiled and released with the force of a living weapon forged in the fires of war. Tyler moved through the chaos with deadly grace, his sidearm barking sharp and decisive. Each shot a symphony of precision aimed at the exposed vulnerabilities of the mechanical invaders. His mind locked into a state of calculated violence where every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a measured calculation of survival against impossible odds. Drones swarmed like a metallic plague, their crimson sensors glowing through the smoke. Their movements eerily fluid as they adapted and regrouped with every fallen unit. Their programming sophisticated enough to predict civilian panic, but unable to account for the unwavering resolve of a soldier who had nothing left to lose. Tyler ducked behind a shattered mailbox as a drone deployed a shockwave emitter, the pulse slamming into the pavement and sending cracks spiderwebbing across the asphalt. His teeth clenched against the gut-wrenching sensation of frequencies designed to disable and disorient. But Titan surged through it unfazed, launching himself at the emitter with a snarl that echoed like a battle cry carved from the bones of ancient warriors. His jaws found purchase on the core unit, ripping it free with a savage twist as the drone collapsed in a shower of sparks, its death throes lighting the battlefield in flashes of dying red light. Tyler pushed forward, adrenaline roaring through his veins as he sprinted to the next position, his mind cataloging every disabled drone, every strategic fallback, his heart pounding. Not from fear, but from the grim exhilaration of standing exactly where he was meant to be, fighting alongside the only companion who truly understood the cost of this stand. Civilians cowered behind darkened windows, their terrified faces illuminated by the flickering fires licking at the edges of their perfect little world. A world built on the illusion of safety, now crumbling under the weight of a reality they were never prepared to face. Tyler's boots slammed against the pavement as he closed the distance to the last cluster of active units, their weapon systems deploying with an audible whir as they locked onto his position. But before they could fire, Titan was there, a force of nature crashing into their ranks with a fury that defied logic. His body a blur of muscle and determination as he tore through their ranks, dismantling them piece by piece until nothing but smoldering wreckage remained. Tyler reached his side, his lungs burning, his vision blurring from smoke and exhaustion. But when he looked down at Titan, bloodied, battered, yet standing tall and defiant, he felt something rise within him, something unbreakable. This wasn't just the end of a fight. This was the line in the sand, drawn in fire and steel, a declaration that no matter the enemy, no matter the odds, they would never fall without a fight. And as the last drone flickered and died beneath Titan's blood-stained paws, Tyler lifted his eyes to the night sky and whispered through clenched teeth, "Not today. Not our home." The first light of dawn crept over Ridgeway Street, its soft glow revealing the battlefield that just hours before had been a quiet suburban haven, now scarred by the brutal confrontation of flesh and steel, courage and circuitry. Smoke curled lazily from the mangled remains of the enemy units, their charred husks littering the pavement like twisted monuments to a war no one had believed possible. Tyler stood at the center of it all, his breath slow but steady, his body battered yet unbowed, one arm wrapped protectively around Titan's thick shoulders, his fingers curling into the matted fur sticky with blood, some of it the dog's, most of it not. Titan stood tall despite the wounds scored across his flank, his head held high, his chest rising and falling in calm, even breaths, his eyes still sharp, still defiant, a living testament to loyalty and unbreakable will. From the cracked doorways and shattered windows, the people of the town emerged slowly, their faces pale, eyes wide and hollow, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror as the truth settled heavy on their shoulders. They had ignored the warnings, dismissed the signs, laughed at the soldier who walked their streets with wary eyes and a silent, watchful guardian at his side. And now, standing in the aftermath, surrounded by the smoking carcasses of machines that had nearly brought their town to its knees, they finally understood the price of their ignorance. The footage captured on shaky cell phones and forgotten security cameras spread like wildfire, crossing digital borders and igniting fear in every corner of the world. Overnight, Ridgeway Street became a symbol, not just of survival, but of resistance against a threat that had long been whispered about in classified circles and dismissed by those too comfortable to believe it could ever reach their doorsteps. Obsidian Vale had been driven back, their advance halted by a single man and his dog, but Tyler knew better than to believe this was the end. He had seen enough battlefields to know that a retreat was never a surrender. It was a recalibration, a pause before the next, more calculated strike. Yet even with that grim certainty burning in his chest, Tyler felt something deeper, something stronger than fear. Resolve. Because no matter what came next, no matter how advanced the machines or how insidious their creators, he and Titan would be ready. This was their home, and they had drawn their line in blood and fire. A line no enemy would ever cross without a fight that shook the earth. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in hues of hope and warning, Tyler knelt beside Titan, his hand resting gently on the dog's scarred head, his voice low but filled with the quiet conviction of a man who had found his purpose. "We're not done yet, boy, not by a long shot." And in that shared silence, beneath the weight of a battle won and a war yet to come, man and dog stood as they always had, side by side, unbroken, ready for whatever darkness would rise with the coming night. Because some wars don't end on foreign soil. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought right here, in the streets we call home, and no matter the cost, they would stand and fight again.